This story takes place when I was homeless and I would park to sleep at a campsite up north from where I am from. This night I pulled in, parked, fed the cats and started to cook and relax with my boyfriend. We had been there no longer than 20 minutes when out of nowhere flashlights appeared in our faces. 4 of them all looking into the windows. I had assumed that was park rangers going to ask me to move since the campsite was technically closed. I rolled down my window a bit and asked what was up, but apparently it was a family of 4 also parked and camping. They had a fire going and a dog, so I figured things were okay here, but there was a really weird feeling about it. We both ignored that feeling. My boyfriend decided to try and befriend him, so we got out to chat. They asked a lot of very pointed personal questions. Are you married? Do you live around here? Do you have any kids? But instead of the adults speaking, it was their 2 kids asking all the questions. They spoke like adults, which made me assume maybe trauma was a real part of their lives at some point. Though the kids put themselves to bed, basically saying Mom and Dad, we're going to bed now. That really rubbed me up the wrong way, but whatever. It just got worse from there. Once the kids retreated, the couple began talking about their converted truck that they lived in. Apparently the kids shared a bed, and a key point that they made was that the van was soundproof. They really wanted to play with our cats, but no such luck. The husband and wife, I only remembered the dude, said his name was Scooter. They started to try to separate me and my boyfriend by saying stuff like, let's walk to the river, let's go look at the car. They were really interested in hearing about any injuries that we might had. At some point they started letting the fire go out and attempting to stand behind us a lot. That was pretty much enough for me and my boyfriend. I stood up, leaving a few things behind, and got into the car. We started it up and started talking like, what the F? It took all of 2 minutes for the woman of the couple to walk up to our car and ask if we were leaving. We said no, obviously, and that we were just cold. She asked to sit in the seat behind us though. I asked why, she didn't answer, and asked if she could sit with us or on my lap. Utterly confused, I asked again, why? She again didn't answer. She said that we can't leave because her husband beats her. So I asked her if she wanted me to call the police. She didn't answer, just pulled out a cigarette and lit it. We looked at each other, and I heard someone douse the fire. With a feeling of extreme unease, I turned to my boyfriend, and this is when I found out that he was suspicious from the very beginning, but didn't think to say anything until now, only to add that if I had stayed and not followed him to the car, that he would have just left me there. Yeah, what a waste of space. But just before I could process it, I heard the husband of the group grab something out of the fire tool set that sounded metallic and heavy, and that's when I got tunnel vision and just hit the gas. I felt that bitch bounce off the side of the van as we pulled away, and just as we got onto the road, we see flashing lights behind us in the distance. Not like police lights, but almost ambulance lights. No way I was stopping for it or pulling off to the side of the road. Do you know how easy it is to buy emergency lights for any car on Amazon? No thanks. The ambulance turned off to a dead-end road eventually. After a while of demon driving into town, we never heard a siren. We looked it up, and the aforementioned river was about 2.5 miles into the dense woods. Apparently, a lot of people go missing out there. I wonder who's to blame. We reported this to the authorities the moment that we got back into town, and they said they would send a few cars up to the campground to check it out, but by the time the police got there was no trace of anybody at the campsite, no smouldering embers from a fire, and no tyre tracks. Our account got called into question. I know exactly what happened up there, and it's something that I'll never forget. I'm lucky enough not to be homeless anymore, but if there's one piece of advice that I would give anybody going through the same situation, don't interact with anybody that doesn't have a badge when you're parked at a campsite and trying to sleep. For about 6 months last year, I lived in the north of Spain. About a week before I was going to move back to Ireland, my friend and I were at my house having dinner and drinking a little. I was renting an apartment in the city, and my roommate was an older lady, maybe in her 50s. I'm 20, just for the story's sake. That night my roommate left to go and have dinner with her friends. About a minute after she left, someone buzzed our door to be let into our building. I looked at the camera, but it was a woman that I didn't recognise. She looked to be in her late 20s maybe, early 30s. I just assumed it was one of my roommate's friends and she was coming to meet her or something like that. I buzzed her into the building assuming that they would meet in the lobby. At first I didn't buzz her in because I didn't recognise her, and she began to walk away from the door. Just about the instant that I hit the buzzer myself, I then looked away from the camera so I couldn't see if she actually entered or not. I just assumed that if she didn't enter she would call or text my roommate and they'd meet up as scheduled. Boy, I was wrong. This woman came up to the 6th floor of my building. She parked herself in front of my apartment. She came up just 2 minutes after my roommate left. So I know she didn't take the stairs, and I know they must have seen each other when my roommate got off the lift. And the lady happened to get in. Realising this is weird. I don't open the door when she rings it. I look through the peephole just to confirm that it was nobody that I knew. And I verified that this woman is no acquaintance of mine. She's a full-blown stranger at this point. I back away from the door and I gesture for my friend to be silent. We creeped back to my room, which is at the far side of the apartment, and I begin calling my roommate, who isn't picking up. Meanwhile, the lady is incessantly ringing my doorbell. My roommate isn't picking up and my friend is just telling me to open the door. In her mind, it's a woman, so she must be harmless. I called her an idiot for underestimating the female sex. Women can be criminals too, after all. She keeps telling me to open the door, but I refuse. Using my better judgment, the door keeps ringing though, and I look out the peephole once more. At this point I understand that if she knew my roommate, or was looking for someone specific, she would just call or text him. But she never took out her phone, she just stayed eerily silent, didn't call out any names or ask if anyone was home. This whole situation was freaking me out. I finally get through to my roommate. She says that she wasn't expecting anyone, and that she doesn't know anyone in that age range. She asked if I'm okay and I reply that I'm fine now. It's been at least 20 minutes. I know the lady knows someone is home because the lights are on, and my best bet is that that's why she's not leaving. I continue watching her through the peephole. I see her go into the lift for a moment and then come back out again. In my mind this means someone's in the lift waiting for her, and this screams sketchy to me. After about 40 minutes she finally leaves. I run to the hall and flick on the outside camera. The lady left the building with 2 large men in tow. They all had backpacks on, and the men looked to be wearing masks. I will forever be grateful for trusting my instincts and not listening to my loudmouth friends. Sometimes it's just better to be safe than sorry. I'm glad to say that I never saw that creepy lady or her henchmen ever again, and I'm truly glad that we didn't ever have to meet. I start by saying that I had a terrible biological father, and he's been a shady person all of my life, and constantly caused me lots of grief. This is just one of those examples. When I was 4, my parents split up. My mother and I moved states, and they agreed that I would visit my dad over school holidays for a week. This particular time I had been with him for a few days when I was playing with my cousins at a nearby park. A car pulled up and I recognised the man as one of my dad's friends. He called me over, and without thinking I ran over to him and left my cousin at the park. He asked me if I could show him where my dad lived, and I agreed and got into the car. I gave directions and didn't notice at all that he wasn't following them correctly. Looking back, I didn't really know the way anyhow. After way too long, I did realise that we were getting closer to the city, which is far from my dad's house. We pull up to a house that I didn't recognise, and the man told me to wait in the car. I did, I didn't feel scared at all for some reason. At this point, he eventually took me inside, and I definitely started to feel unsafe then. I remember 2 girls passed out in the main room, and a much older man was feeling them up everywhere. I made eye contact with this man. You'd feel sick to your stomach. I had definitely figured out that this was a bad situation at this juncture. A lady took me into a bedroom and brought me a sandwich. The bread was stale and I wasn't hungry, but I ate it anyway because I felt bad for her, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's what I was thinking about. Then the lady told me a lot of things that I didn't understand, but when she left I remember thinking my dad was coming to pick me up soon. I fell asleep waiting for him. I went to bed that night and no one came in to see me until the next day. As I cried very loudly and banged on the door, the lady came back and yelled at me for stinking up her bedroom, and I asked about my dad. She said that he was coming tonight after he finished work. She didn't offer me a shower or a bath. So I sat in my spoiled pants all day after that. Everything turned into a blur. Really, my dad didn't come that night, and I was terrified. In my head, I felt like I was there for months. I thought I was missing school and that everyone had forgotten about me. In reality, I was there for 5 days. They let me take 1 shower. I don't remember eating much except for boring sandwiches, and I had chips and gravy once. After not being able to get a hold of me or my dad for so long, in addition to me missing my pre-booked flight home, my mom drove across the country to come and get me. She knew that something wasn't right, and she didn't ignore a gut feeling. When it was time to come find me, thank God she did. She found my dad at his girlfriend's house, messed out, completely hiding out. Turns out he owed a lot of drug money to the people who had taken me. They had told him that they had me, but he couldn't afford it or didn't want me back. Whatever it was, he didn't bother to try to get me back at all. My amazing mom paid his debt for him, after borrowing from a lot of people, and then she came back to get me. I remember someone came into the room and told me my mom was here. When I walked out of that terrible room, I could smell her. It was the best feeling to feel safe again. She took me home and I didn't see my dad again for a long time. She never called the police. My parents' relationship was very complicated then, and I fully understand the choices that she made. I'm definitely okay now. I've spoken about this in therapy and I come to terms with most of the things that I went through as a child. But still, a messed up situation for a 4-year-old girl to have to be in. Thanks to everyone who likes, comments and subscribes on my videos. I really appreciate it. If you enjoy these 3 stories, you will enjoy the next 3 stories in the box above. Thank you.